Good day, everyone. This day, our topic will be about Rostow's model of development. So, this is a theory na saying an economy or a country ay dumadaan sa iba't ibang stages to develop its economy. So, in Rostow's model of development, he said, in order to develop an economy, we must we must have a breakthrough within the 5 stages of development. So from ancient times to modern times. So ano ba ang mga naging stages ng isang bansa in order to develop its economy, its infrastructures, and more. So this theory ay ginawa ni Walt Whitman Rostow. So history of Rostow's model, one of the first models to account for economic growth and probably still the simplest, was put forward by W. Rostow in 1960. He suggested that all the countries in his study had the potential to break the cycle of poverty and develop through 5 linear stages. So according kay Rostow, all countries has the potential to break the cycle of poverty through the his stages of development. So from the ancient times, the ancient civilizations, from hunting to farming, trading, and the modernization of technologies to mass high consumption stage. Okay, so this is one of the first economic theories na ginagamit. So na-form siya or naging theory siya last 1960. So stages of economic development. So this is a linear theory of development. Of course, when we say linear, it has its stages. Kumbaga pagkasunod-sunod na stages. Economies can be divided into primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors. The history of developed countries suggests a common pattern of structural change. So, of course, this is actually the simplest theory when it comes to economic growth. So, all developed countries or mga well-developed na countries na like Japan, America, Russia, China, of course, dumaan sa ganitong stages. Sa stages na binigay ni Rostow. Okay. So, what was the model? Every society had to pass through these 5 stages. So, as I have mentioned a while ago, every society had or kumbaga kailangan nilang pagdaanan ang ganitong stages or ang 5 stages na binigay sa theory ni Rostow. So what is development? Then we have ito yung 5 stages ni Rostow. So first, the traditional societies, preconditions for takeoff stage, the drive to maturity stage, and high mass consumption stage. Okay, first, or the stage 1 is the traditional society. The economy is dominated by subsistence activity. So economy is dominated by subsistence activity. Output is consumed by producers rather than traded. Any kind of trading is done by bartering. Agriculture is the most important industry, thus making production labor intensive. So in traditional societies, this stage is baga the primary stage. So an example of this is the ancient civilizations or sinaunang pamumuhay ng tao. So people during this time is actually focused on hunting and farming. So instead of trading their products for monetary or financial gain, so they consume it or they use those products for their own consumption. Kumbaga, they hunt for their own consumption. Manghunt sila para sa ilang pagkaon. Mag-farm sila para silang pagkaon. And if they hunt or they farm for trading, it's a form of barter or exchange of products. So for example, in Mabuhay, in General Santos, we have this different types of areas. For example, the areas near the base or baybay, dol sa dagat, and of course we have these farms like Barangay Mabuhay and Lagaw. So example lang. So in areas like the Janga South and Barangay Bula, which areas na kumbaga dool sa dagat, of course they have these products na wala sa ibang areas like Lagaw and kumbaga Mabuhay, Barangay Mabuhay. So for example, in Barangay Mabuhay, they have the crops, root crops, kamuting kahoy, kamote, mais. So areas of Barangay Bula, wala sila ang mga crops. That's why they have to do bartering or swapping of their goods. So since si Barangay Bula dool sa karang dagat, of course mayaman siya sa isda, na siya resources for fish. So pwede siya mangisda kung gusto niya og mais. Then they have to swap their kumbaga products. So ingana lang ang way of nila trading before. So kumbaga goods kapalit sa goods. So financial gain dili pa siya ang focus ana. In other countries, commonly since golds and other precious metals are actually important for them, of course they do trading for golds, for silvers. So that's it, but actually the focus isn't for financial gain. So any kind of trading is done by bartering. Agriculture is the most important industry. So agriculture during this time is the important industry. Why? So because they need kumbaga they need products for their consumption. So during that time wala pa man sila ganid og kuryente, wala pa man sila ganid og education. So their main focus is for food, for their own consumption, food, clothes, shelter. So that's it. So have you heard any, of course including territory, so have you heard stories from our elders na kapalit sa isa ka baka is isa ka hektarya nga yuta. So ingana lang ang trading sa una. So we don't need money. So and of course agriculture is the important industry. So again, wala man sila need for electricity. Ilahang need lang is food and shelter, and of course clothing. So they do farming, and of course sa una pag namanggid tay needs, of course we have to do farming para natay ikaswap sa other products na need na to or necessary for us. So subsistence economic activity, outputs is consumed by producers rather than traded, but is consumed by who produce it. Trade by barter, where goods are exchanged or swapped. Agriculture is the most important industry, and production is labor intensive. So labor intensive, why? Because wala pang enough na or wala pang modern technologies na magpapadali sa trabaho ng tao. So they use animals like cows, horses, carabaos, and other animals para, for example, mag-araro sa yuta nga ilahang i-farm. They have to kumbaga plant their crops mano-mano, unlike today na may isa lang ka machine. So agian lang sa tractor, matanom na dayon tong mga gulay, prutas. So that's why it is very kumbaga the labor is intensive, or the labor was intensive during this time. Kumbaga mano-mano. So this time in some areas like hindi man gyud ang Philippines man gyud is dili man gyud siya well developed pa. So we still use the traditional way of farming. Like baka lang gyapon ang ginagamit for pag-araro, kalabaw, kabayo. But in some places like California, they use machines. They use their trucks. They use technologies to plant, to kumbaga para magdilig sa ilahang tanom, and of course to harvest and process the products. So nga na siya. Unlike today na very easy na farming. So preconditions of modernization, or the stage 2. Preconditions of modernization, industrialization would have just begun. An emergence of transport and infrastructure to support trade, savings and investment grew. So in precondition stage, the early stage of development, or the second stage of development, of course nag-start na ang industrialization. Kumbaga anam-anam nag-recognize na ang tao in the use of kumbaga in materials na magamit yun nila. So the right example pala dito is the trading of goods in return of precious metals like golds. So because during that time, if you have the golds, you have the precious metals, kumbaga you have the wealth, you have the power to purchase the goods na kailangan mo. So that's it. Dito pala belong ang example na the exchange their products in exchange of golds or silvers. So industrialization, so industries like kumbaga beyond farming or beyond their consumption, they began to trade it for kumbaga it's either financial gain or kumbaga gold reserve. So in places like if as we can see in movies, places in what they call China, they kumbaga ang mode of payment nila before is the gold reserve or the golds or silvers. So kumbaga paliton na dire na nag-start nga paliton ang yuta in exchange of gold or silver. So ingana na. An emergence of transport and infrastructure to support trade. Kumbaga nag-start na pud ang pantalan, ang stations, markets. So nag-start na diri sa precondition stage. So why? So of course, there are places na, for example, gold is kumbaga may value naman gid siya sa tao for different uses. Kumbaga may specific use kasi ang gold sa kanila before. That's why they began to trade it or their products. Naga-farm sila, but this is just in kumbaga smaller scale. Kumbaga for example is they trade their products for nearby places lang. So if ang bartering is this an exchange of goods or products in kumbaga nearby tribes, for example barangay to barangay, and of course deep in precondition stage, it is the trading is through one place to another, like example is Jensan to Davao. So that's why they need ports, they need kumbaga terminals. Kung asa for example in ports, they need to transport for example the easiest way to transport their products is through the seas. That's why they have to build ports. So they have to build ports. Of course, if ever na through land or traveling through land, of course they have to do to have this kumbaga markets, different stations para dito hatod ang ilang products. Ito ibaligya ang ilang products. So infrastructure. So kumbaga nag-start na like pantalan. So those are example of infrastructures. Markets. So compared to the earlier stage, the prehistoric or the traditional stage, wala pa sila ingana nga mga infrastructures. Wala pa sila nagbuhat og ingana nga infrastructures. Kumbaga they maybe tungod pud sa kumbaga barter. So it is hard manggod nga magmita nga nga place for to do the barter. Unlike if they have to put up an infrastructure, for example a specific area, tindugan nila as market. So kabalo ang ibang lugar nga may goods pod nga wala sa ilaha, nga dira ade ay ginabuhat ang bartering. So for example ikaw ug ako magbarter ta, imuha bugas, ako asin. So it is so hard to set a meeting place. So why not magbuhat og isa ka specific place nga mas dali matultulan sa iba. So and of course its benefits, my goods, for example di man pwede nga asin og bugas lang atong iilis perme. Of course they have we will have other tribes na mag-join sa bartering, nga naaday sila karne, naaday sila mais, nga pwede mag-join sa bartering because we have this specific place kung asa ta pwede mag-meet to do bartering. So that was in a preconditional stage. So ito savings and investments. So nag-start na po ang savings and investments. So take-off stage or the third stage. Industrialization increased, Workers switch from agricultural sector to manufacturing sector. Economic transitions, evolutions of new political and social institutions to support industrializations, generates increasing incomes and therefore able to sustain more investments. So, in stage 3, kumbaga, from stage 2, na enhanced na or na-develop siya into stage 3 like from meeting place or from ports nga gamay lang ang gamit for trading. So gi-enhance nila, they can now kumbaga mas daghan na ang tao nga nagadto draa. So infrastructures is na-develop. Industrialization increased. So nag-start na ang pagbuhat og factories. So since na may mga factories, of course mag-start na og ka-switch ang kumbaga way of living from agricultural to manufacturing. So for example, usually naman siya family owned businesses. So for example, from agricultural, kumbaga from farming, they chose to kumbaga products manufacturing na, like in other countries during the industrialization nga nag-increase, like na sila ay infrastructure like karang nagahabi og tela. So before wala may nagahabi og tela. So nay mga mga area before na not good in hunting, dili pud siya good in farming. And of course since the society is developing, kailangan nila ng source for their consumption. That's why, and since nag-start na ang factories like food processing, nagabuhat og pagkaon, and of course these different industries like paghabi og tela nga ginagamit nila for trading. So of course maka-inganyo na siya og workers to work for that industry. So savings and investments grew up. So during this time na kumbaga people do trading, people do trading for financial gain na. So they use monetary or money. So anam na nagagamit og kwarta ang tao. So for example in Jensan, so or for example in Dole or in Pulumulok, di Dole. So in the beginning hindi naman kasi pwede na agad-agad to put up, but of course it also before mano-mano man gyud na siya, mano-mano maglimpyo og pinya, mano-mano mag slice, mano-mano basta everything before is mano-mano. But now butang lang nimo ang pinya, kuha na sa machine, slice na niya, pagawas tilatan na. So that's it. But in kumbaga in stage 3, it is still or kumbaga wala pa siya sa peak nga very easy na lang ang kumbaga it is just on the middle stage. So from then the economic transition, so nag-start na po ang political and social institution to support industrialization. That's it. Drive to maturity. The economy begins to diversify into new areas technological innovation. So during this time, if naka-witness mo in areas like Basakan, so sa una ang gamit is kalabaw, but now we have these tractors. So we also have these machines na mas mapadali ang trabaho sa tao. So sa una, for example in Dole, sa una mano-mano hakwaton sa trabante ang kumbaga ang mga products with care. But today, nanay mga machines nga maghakot ana. So of course technology is developing. Kumbaga napapagaan na yung trabaho, kumbaga easier. So the economy begins to diversify. Kumbaga from small trading, now we do it in kumbaga mas na ang trading, mas malakihan na ang trading. So compared to the recent stages, we deliver or we produce our products in kumbaga we export our products in other places na maliban sa ating area. So that's it. The economy begins to produce a wider goods and services. Less reliance on imports. So naga-import lang ta if kulang ang production sa ato like bugas. So kung kulang ang production sa atong area, of course we have to import. But in this stage, nagalas na ang import or dili na necessary ang import because we have this large amount of products or goods sa ato. But in the situation of Philippines nowadays, I think we are still on the second stage, if I am not mistaken, or we are on the third or second stage. So since Philippines is still importing goods, that's the problem, the biggest problem in Philippines, because naman tayo Basakan, most of our areas are agricultural, but sadly we have this situation na ga-import gyapon ta for I don't know what is the reason. So there are also politicians who are aiming na we will stop exporting, or we will kumbaga minimize exporting. First we have to consume and to kumbaga tangkiliko ng ato ang products para kumbaga dili ta mag-shortage or dili ta magka-shortage sa ato ang product mismo. Why? Because most of us are so ambitious, especially private companies. Most of us are too ambitious to earn mas dako nga kwarta. That's why we have to trade it outside the country, because we will earn kumbaga money higher than peso. So that's it. And of course the negative effect, nag-export tag bugas pero wala tay bugas. That's why we have to import, or the situation kasi we lack support for our farmers. Kumbaga we're trying to become an industrial country or nation, though we are an agricultural, or kumbaga we're trying to become a industrial country, pero ato ang area is for agriculture, suitable for agriculture or best for agriculture. So and of course if we really want to develop this, we have to support, first we have to support the farming or the agriculture. Then if nanata sa enough stage or mature na nga stage to do or to kumbaga mag step up to the next stage, then we will kumbaga we will develop technologies or even purchase technologies na helpful for our production. So in that way ma-develop na, because first we have to sustain, kumbaga kailangan i-provide po nato daan ang needs sa ato ang people. Then if enough na, then we will export or give it to or trade it to other countries. But sadly, for example, pineapples and saging or bananas from Dole, kung paliton nato diri is mahal kayo, though we are producing it. We have large areas nga nagaproduce og saging og pinya, but diri sa ato mahal kayo. So that's it. Next, or the final stage, is the high mass consumption. Economy is geared towards mass consumption. The service sector becomes increasingly dominant. So this is the final stage, kumbaga the society has kumbaga na sila sa highest peak. So for example is Japan. So they can sustain the needs of their people. They have this large production of their goods and products. So kumbaga though dako man ang consumption sa ilahang people, they can sustain it. That's why poverty is not kumbaga poverty isn't existing or causing that causing problems na ingana gyud same sa Philippines. So the service sector becomes increasingly dominant. So according dito, sectors or the service sectors like those who provides different services, whether it is pagkaon ba, materials ba, so they can provide, and of course barato ang ang ilang products or ilang service. The age of high refers to the period of contemporary comfort afforded by Western nations, wherein consumers concentrate on durable goods and hardly remember the subsistence concerns of previous stages mass consumption. So the failures of Rostow's model. It is limited. The determinants of the country stage of the economic development are usually seen broader. So the failure of this theory is kumbaga the dominance of determinants of country stage of economic development are broader. Kumbaga mas wider pa man gid ana tinuod lang. But kumbaga in Rostow's, this is the basics. Kumbaga nag-agi man gyud diri ang isa ka country. So for example, kumbaga the traditional societies. So tanan man nga society nag-start man in traditional way. Kumbaga walay technologies, and of course in some countries or in some part of this country, even here in the Philippines, there are communities who are still in traditional stage. For example, in areas or far-flung areas of clan, they do the kumbaga mano-mano nga farming. They do not use or they do not have machines na magaling sa ilahang palay. kumbaga ginamano-mano gyapon nila og bayo. So there are places here in Philippines na still on its traditional stage. So that's it. That's the reality. Okay. Rostow's model is limited. So limited because maybe this is limited because it was nag-focus lang siya sa the basics like traditional stage alangan before man gid siya mag stage 2 na gid siya other pang agian stages, but this is the basics kasi the quality and quantity for resources, a country's technologies, a country's institutional structures, law of contract. So Rostow's models explain the development experience of Western countries. So, according dito, nakafocus lang ang theory ni Rostow sa Western countries. But still, I think it is still applicable in other countries also. Kumbaga, country is dumadaan naman talaga sa ganitong stages. So, Japan is not a Western country. It is an Asian country. But dumaan sila sa ganitong stage. Even China and also Philippines. But wala pa tayo sa stage or the final stage. Rostow's model assumes incorrectly that all countries start off at the same level. So, every country, according dito, na-fail ang theory ni Rostow because gi-generalize niya nga tanan country nag-start gid sa traditional stage. So, there are countries, or there are, for example, in smaller scope, there are communities na nag-agig traditional stage. So for example, in an area na wala may tao sa una, then ang isa ka company, dako ang company nag-put up of business. And then of course, since it is far from the people, people will begin to look for a place where they can live near to their kumbaga trabahoan. And of course, di na sila mag-agi sa traditional way. So, like maghunting pa, mag-farming, but nagdiretso na sila to industrialization. So that's it. So it predicts the short time scale between the beginning of growth and the time when a country becomes self-sustaining. It overemphasizes the effect of learning curve. Time taken for the country to develop diminishes as country learned from others that are developed. So we use other countries or developed countries as our models. So that's reality man gyud. We keep on comparing our country from others, or we keep comparing our community from others. Generalizes nature, it makes somewhat limited. It does not set down the detailed nature of preconditions for growth. In reality, policymakers are unable to clearly identify stages as they merge together. So, in some reasons daw, policymakers are unable, wala na nila na identify kung unsa man gyud ang exact stage nga giagian sa kalugar because from the merge together na it is because of the naman good, maybe this is based on the modern times, because nowadays mas dali ang development because of advancement in technologies. strengths. Our economic self-interest calls for the rapid development of the rest of the world. So this theory helps the kumbaga the rapid development. In what way? Because gi-explain niya kailangan ni siya nga stage or unsa ang nadiri nga stages, and of course in other countries they believe na they believe na useful ang theory ni Rostow. A richer world is likely to become a more peaceful world. So since most of us are, even crime exists because of commonly because of poverty. Self-interest is kumbaga personal interest is lesser reasons for poverty, but most or usually it is caused by poverty. Savings and capital formation central to the process of growth, hence development. The key development is to mobilize savings to generate investments to set in motion in generating income growth. Then that's all. So yun lang ang ating topic for today. And of course, so here in the situation of Philippines, we can use this theory, or it is applicable because we are a good a country good for agriculture. So we can use this theory na from agricultural and hinay-hinay turning to industrial. But first we have to kumbaga i-develop ang ating productions. So we have a lot of companies na nag-focus sa agriculture like Dole and Del Monte. So sadly it is owned by private individuals, but we're hoping na our economists will use this to answer or to solve poverty. So that's all for today.